What is up, YouTube, and everybody else that's streaming? Welcome to Custom Points Live. I'm your host, Jarrett, and I'm here to talk to you today about credit card points 101. A lot of people see it a little bit differently, and I wanted to kind of tell you my approach and see what I can do to help with everybody that has a different situation here. So I'm going to just do my best to go through a little bit more organized. You can see we have a little bit more production value. I'm aiming to get it even better. Just as a quick reminder, if you get any value from this video, would really appreciate if you could like, comment, subscribe, and let's start with the video. I'm going to start with telling you guys that I have a family. You might hear them. I have a family of 3 and 1 on the way. And my 2-year-old is a 2-year-old. So if you have any background noises and it's a little bit annoying, my apologies for any background noises there. So let's get started on Credit Card 101. First thing we should talk about is credit scores. Everybody has a different score, of course. If you have a lower score, it might be for a few different things. There's some false information that people spread that you should keep a balance on your card. Something like 30% I hear sometimes, and that's actually not true. The goal is to have 0 utilization. What that means is that by the time your statement closes, you have no charges on your card. I personally like to pay off my cards every Friday. That's just my approach. Not everybody can do that. I understand that not everybody's in the same position, but the goal for getting rewards from credit cards is to not be having to pay any interest. If you're paying interest on the cards, that's actually what the bank is using to fuel all of what people are doing on when it comes to travel or cash back on their cards is the amount of money that they're making from interest. It's a lot of money out there. If you have anything bad on your credit report from the past, my experience is that it falls off after 7 years. So if your credit's low and you think that there's no possible opportunity that you'll ever have good credit again, that's just simply not the case. I've gone through it myself, and I can tell you that my score drastically improved literally overnight from 1 month to the next after 7 years after something negative fell off my report. So I will just simply tell you that it's not the end of the world. It takes time, but once that has happened, they're going to look at the last 7 years of your history. So always make sure you're paying your cards off on time and in full. That's what matters most. And if you're doing that, then you can have perfect credit. And of course, keeping your utilization as low as possible, that's going to be helping you. The other thing that I'll hear people say is that, well, if I get too many credit cards, is that going to hurt my credit? No. There is a small percentage of your credit score that is affected by applications and by new accounts. It's your account age. So the longer that your average age of accounts is, the better your credit is going to be. Obviously, getting a bunch of credit cards at once when you are first getting credit cards, that's probably going to hurt your credit initially. But the percentage that is affected by both of those things is relatively small, that if your credit is perfect in every other way, it's actually going to be not too bad to be getting a bunch of cards pretty quickly. And of course, to be getting, as long as you keep your utilization low. The other thing that's beneficial about having a bunch of cards is that you have a bunch of different credit lines out there, and that all adds up to, in total, how much your available credit is. And so if you're using the usual amount, but all of a sudden now you have a bunch of different credit available to you, that lowers your utilization right there. So that's another helpful tool that a lot of people don't think about. So there's no reason to be afraid of having multiple credit cards. There's no reason to be afraid of any of this stuff. The only caveat to that is, of course, that you are being responsible, that you are paying your cards off on time and in full. If that is not you, I highly recommend that you keep to a debit card. Guys like Dave Ramsey are right on the money when they tell you that credit cards are to be avoided and to stay away. My experience is that credit cards, if used wisely as a tool, can be extremely valuable, and that's what I want to talk to you guys about today. So the first thing I want to talk about with credit card points and miles strategy is something called player 2. So if you have a player 2, that's your spouse, could be your significant other, and that is the opportunity to have multiple cards that are in each of your names. Sometimes it's We'll talk about this a little bit later, but sometimes it's beneficial to have, one player who can get as many cards as they want and another player who's sticking to something called 524, which is to keep a certain limited amount of cards that they're getting on a regular basis. Sometimes it's helpful to have different things, but the point is that, the way that you approach credit card points and miles strategy really comes down to if you have a player available, another player available to you. And if not, that's okay. You can certainly still mitigate that and utilize just one person. The next thing I wanted to discuss is cashback versus travel cards. Now, a lot of times people don't realize that the cashback cards, which they think are the most valuable, are actually the least valuable. Cashback is great. You can get cards that get you 5% back in certain categories, and that sounds fantastic. But the reality is that unless you don't like traveling, cashback cards are actually going to be a worse deal most of the time. That doesn't mean all the time, because there's a wonderful YouTuber. If you don't watch him yet, you should. His name is Luke's Points and Miles, and he's a big fan of both cashback and travel points. And he will use his cashback sometimes to buy points. It's a really great point. So you can buy points and miles if you don't have enough that you've earned through cards, but it's obviously a lot more profitable to earn them through cards, and we'll talk more about exactly that. Travel cards, on the other hand, can be extremely valuable. If you're okay with using points towards travel, which I love to do, you can get crazy cashback equivalents, where for me, I'm getting something like sometimes 70% back on certain cards at certain times. And so we'll talk more about that. Some of that's going to be advanced strategies. We'll talk more about what advanced strategies are below. But just so you're aware, there's a big difference between 70% and 5%. So everybody's a little different. The next one is something called sign-up bonuses. If you're not familiar, a lot of these banks will offer cards for an introductory offer where you basically spend a few $1,000s and you get in exchange, either tens of thousands of points or sometimes hundreds of thousands of points if it's a business card. It seems to be that business cards are often where you get a lot more value, and business cards don't hurt you when it comes to your new accounts towards application statuses, which we'll talk about in a second. But business cards are not just something that are available to what you think of as a brick and mortar business. You can have any kind of a business. It's a small business. You can have it as a sole proprietorship in your name with your social security number. You do not have to have an EIN to open up a business account. And you also, you want to have some kind of a business. So whether you're an Uber driver, whether you're, doing TaskRabbit, anything like that, where you're putting yourself out there and you're doing some type of a transaction in exchange for value, that's a business. And so you should be capitalizing on the fact that you do have a business and take advantage of the opportunities that business cards offer, because you don't have to just be limited to personal cards. They're not scary. It's basically, the same kind of concept. Banks are a little different here and there, and there's some nuance to what I just said, but on a whole, that's basically how it works. Referral bonuses, like I mentioned, if you have a player two, one of the strategies when you're getting a sign-up bonus, you're going for a sign-up bonus, is to actually, if one of you already has the card, you can actually send that player a referral link, and then when they sign up, you receive points for the referring them to to that card, and then they still get the sign-up bonus. Now, sometimes referral bonuses, the sign-up bonuses are a little bit less for your player two than what they would be if it was a public offer. So you have to do the math and decide which one's better for you. Also, you might want to decide that, well, it's better off that all of the points stay in one person's account, because then they can all be used at the same time. But a lot of these banks, you can send the points to different transfer partners, and you're able to utilize the partners simultaneously. So regardless of you earning the points in two separate accounts, you might be able to merge depending on what the transfer partner is. And speaking of that, transfer partners, just so that everybody understands what that is, long story short, these banks have relationships with different airlines, and they have different relationships with different hotels. The list is different for each issuer. The main issuers would be, of course, American Express, Chase. Those are probably the two bigger ones. Then you have Capital One, which was easily a third. You have Citi, which is what I would say is the fourth. Then you have Wells Fargo, who's come on the scene and is doing a better job as of lately. They also have some great cards, but again, there would probably be like the fifth tier. And then you have another company called Built, which is a reward system. They're not an actual issuer. They right now they're switching over to cardless, and Built's points are actually as valuable, if not more valuable, than any other. They have more transfer partners than it seems any other of these banks do, and that's why people are really excited about Built. So we'll get into that on another occasion. So that's how the transfer partners work. Basically, you can transfer your points from the issuer account to one of those, either airline or hotel. And usually the ratio is 1-to-1, but sometimes the ratios can be a little different. Sometimes they're less, sometimes they're more. And then, of course, there's also things called transfer bonuses, which is promotional times where you can, submit you can send your points with an extra bonus on top. So it's to encourage you to do so during those promotional periods, and that can be very valuable. So it's important to stay ahead of all of those. The next thing that we should also think about, now that we've kind of got an idea of the lay of the land, is, what kind of traveler are you? Are you the kind of person that's really looking for the highest end hotels? That's how I am. I want to stay in the nicest places. I want to stay there as long as I possibly can. I've got a family of 3, soon to be 4, and I want to relax. I want to enjoy myself, and I want to have a wonderful time with my family and make memories. That's what I'm looking for when I travel. You could be, a business traveler, and you're really just looking to spend as many nights as you possibly can on the road as affordably as you possibly can. That's a different person and a whole different approach to the strategy. You might be a person that doesn't mind staying with their family at, the Motel 6. There's nothing wrong with that. You want to be going to, let's say Disney as much as possible. You're not really interested in, the resorts. So you just want to be, hitting theme parks as much as you possibly can. That's a different approach. Maybe you're interested just in cruises, and that's all that's exciting to you is cruises. So you want to try to maximize as much as you can for cruises. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of that. We can discuss that sometime, but really it's if this is more for the person that's looking for flights and hotels. But there's all different kinds of approaches that people have as far as what kind of a traveler they are, if it is travel points and miles that you're looking for. The next thing to think about is, are you solo, are you a couple, or are you a family? The benefit of being a couple, of course, is that now you have 2 players and 2 different people that can get cards. That's really beneficial because you can stagger what your approach is across 2 different people. If you're one person, that's totally fine as well. I didn't hear about or know anything about this until I already had a family. So I've never been in the position of traveling solo, but there's tons of YouTubers that discuss that. They're able to still travel and enjoy themselves, and they're having a blast. So being one person is by no means gonna take you out of the game. But having a second person can really benefit you a lot. Now, if you have a family, one thing to consider is if you have a child that's under 2 years old, a lap infant can be on your lap. You don't have to pay for an extra ticket. You do generally have to pay additional taxes and fees, but you can still save yourself those points. But as soon as that child is 2 years old, and they don't just ask, you have to, show them the passport and stuff like that. So, as soon as they're 2 years old, you do have to buy a ticket for them, regardless. So if you are looking to fly business class or lie flat seats in first class, as far as possible, keep in mind that you're going to have to earn a lot more points for a family than you would if it's just 2 people. So for me and my family, that's one of the things that now that I had my son is 2 years old and he is no longer able to do the lap infant seats. I'm also making sure that I have tons of points available for my family so that the 4 of us want to fly soon. In 2 years from now, it's going to be 4 of us needing seats, and I got to make sure I'm accruing points at a very heavy clip to make sure that everybody can fly the way they want to. The next question to ask yourself is, what airlines tend to offer the most destinations to your home airport? Now, for us, we live in South Florida, so our main airports are Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and Palm Beach. Palm Beach and Fort Lauderdale are preferable for us. We're kind of in the middle of both, but Miami tends to be where we fly the most out of because there are so many destinations that you can get to for the least amount of points. That comes into play because not that you have to choose a chosen airline. I didn't have like a chosen airline. I don't have one in mind that I love flying. For me, it's about which airline is going to give me the most value. I want to be able to spend the least amount of points because, again, like I said, I have a family. I need to be able to, get my points to go as far as they possibly can. And so I need to choose redemptions that are going to be most cost effective from a points perspective for me. I am able to generate a sizable amount of points, and we can discuss all the different strategies and tips later on. But regardless of that, it adds up. I mean, just in the last few months, I've spent about 500,000 airline points myself just for my family. And that's on like 2 or 3 trips. And that's with doing a really good job of keeping the points low. So, and that's, business class seats. So you gotta keep that in mind, that the size of your family matters. And then of course, also what airlines are near you, because that tells you what points you want to accumulate. If you have, for example, a desire to fly as many Delta flights as you can, then you want to lean into American Express because Delta, of course, American Express transfers to Delta. That's not your only option, though. There are other transfer partners that you can still transfer to Delta. So there's other ways to skin the cat, but the moral of the story is that you just want to have an idea of lay of the land of where you live and what airlines are kind of the biggest in your area. The next thing to ask yourself is, what kind of destinations do you have in mind? I have a friend that's in the points and miles space, and he prefers to travel to mountains. He loves seeing the mountains. He loves that kind of a destination, and good for him. That's awesome. I don't mind the mountains. We just got back from some mountains ourselves, but for us, we want to go to tropical places. The other thing for us to consider is, it's not very easy to fly with a family, especially with a 2-year-old. We've done it. My 2-year-old just got back from his 25th flight in about 14 months. He didn't start flying until he was around a year and 2 months old, and then he's been flying in about, like I said, 14 months, about 12 months. 14 months. He flew 25 times, 25 different flights, and so that's been great. When he was breastfeeding, it was super easy because with the ear popping thing, the breastfeeding helped with that. But after he's no longer breastfeeding, it's been harder. We find, chomping on the little cheese balls, the crunchy ones, that kind of helps with unclogging the ear. So there's ways around it. But for us, we would love nothing more than to go to Italy, Greece. My biggest bucket list destination is Japan. And it's frustrating. I have tons of credit card points just waiting to be used that I would love to be able to use on those kinds of redemptions. But we don't have a lot of help with him being able to leave our son with the family. And plus, we love bringing him along. So we've chosen to go to predominantly, Caribbean destinations, Central America. We can fly to South America. And being that we're close to Miami, that's super easy. So we don't have to do many connections, if at all. I think we've only had a couple of times that we had to stop over. When we flew to Hawaii, we decided to stay a night in LA just to be able to break up the flight for the at the time 1-year-old. So there's different approaches. There's different things that might make sense to you, but you want to have an idea what kind of destinations that you're looking to stay at and to go to, so that you can kind of get an idea what cards might be good. You want to back all this into your strategy. The next thing is, how flexible is your availability for travel, and how many days would you like to travel if you could, in total or at a time? So, I know there's a lot of people that have families that are older kids, and they really don't want to take their kids out of school if they can avoid it. So that limits them to, spring break and summer and fall break, things like that. and the holidays. So they have certain times that are available to them, and that's a good thing in certain respects because it gives them a limited number of days that they can use, and therefore they can maximize those as much as possible, which is fantastic. But then there's also families that, like mine, which our child's young. My wife is a stay-at-home mom, and I have the flexibility that I can travel. So the more flexible I am, the more opportunities I have for redemptions, because there is such a thing as award availability. So even though you might have the points and even though you can get that redemption, it doesn't mean that that redemption is available exactly the day that you plan to go. So you really want to keep it open, and you want to keep your schedule as available as possible. And there's different websites you can go to check the availability. You can stay on top of it. You can book things. And a lot of times with points, not always, but a lot of times you can book something and then you can still cancel it without any issues. You're not going to necessarily get charged. Sometimes you will. So you have to look into that. That's worth paying attention to. The next question to ask is, what does your organic spend, current spend, look like? So the thing that matters with organic spend is you want to ask yourself, how much money do I spend each month on dining? That's a big category. That's a lot of cards will give you a lot of value on dining spend. I know there's a great YouTuber, Anthony Venture, and he's a fantastic guy. I mean, he knows everything there is to know. Big fan of the channel. You should definitely check him out if you haven't heard of him. But Anthony, he'll tell you he doesn't go out to eat almost ever. So that's a perfect example of someone that should not be optimizing around dining cards, right? Or dining multipliers for cards. He's going to be optimizing for grocery spend, for example. So there's everybody's a little bit different. What categories are important to you and what are not important to you, but you might want to itemize your categories. So that could be things like your catch-all spend, which would be everything that's not going to fit in a category. It could be things like streaming services. That's a category. It could be things that are closer to gas. Could be grocery. Could be dining. With the Bilt card now, mortgage is a factor. There's a lot of different strategies and different categories that matter as to what cards you should be considering as far as capturing the most value you can from your organic spend. Now, I say organic spend because that is the spend that you would naturally do, but there is spend that you can do that wouldn't necessarily be natural and is still positive value, and we'll talk more about that when we get to advanced strategies. The next question to ask yourself is, if you're new to this space, you're probably wondering, what cards do I have in my wallet and how valuable are these? I know I started out, I had a couple of cards and I thought, oh, these aren't valuable, I'm going to cancel them. And that was like not necessary, because they were cards that didn't have annual fees and they weren't hurting me in any way. So I did not need to cancel them. But unfortunately, it was before I knew any of this stuff, and I did. That was a bad move, because the older cards are better for your credit, right? The longer you have the cards and the time that you've had the cards, the better. So I wish I had learned all of this ahead of time, and I would have not canceled those cards. So the point is, don't cancel your old cards, but you can build on the ones that do work for you. So if you do happen to have, for example, an Amex Gold, that's a very popular card, maybe you want to build your Amex cards out, because you're already accumulating membership reward points. You also might want to consider not cashing those out for statement credit, even if you have cashback. Some cards, for example, Capital One has cards that are cashback cards, but you can actually transfer those into and this works as well. You can transfer those into miles, Capital One miles, or with Chase UR points, if you have cards that do earn those. And so that isn't just a penny, that's a point. So very, very much more valuable if it's a point rather than a penny. So that would be the next thing, is to avoid just cashing out your points right now, unless you absolutely need to, and there's nothing wrong with it when the time comes. But the goal is to get as much value as you can from those points. The next question is bank application rules. Not really a question. So a lot of people don't realize that each of these banks have different application rules. And I'm going to just show you an example of a fantastic article that you can check out. Again, this is I'm using this software for the first time, so forgive me for being a little bit clumsy with it. But I'm going to add a screen share here, and hopefully I'm selecting the correct one. And away we go. So I'm going to add that, and here you go. So this is an article from Frequent Miler, and if you've never heard of them, I highly recommend subscribing to their newsletter. They're just a treasure trove of information, and what you'll see here is that they've listed the application rules for each bank. So you can literally go through here and see exactly what it is, what it says, and they do a pretty good job of updating this from time to time to make sure it's still accurate based on, what people say online. So this is a great way to get started if you're not really sure where you stand and what to do. This is really important. The most common one that people talk about here is for Chase. Chase here has something called the 524 rule. And this is just an example, but a lot of banks have something like this. So it's important to know how it works. So what it means is that you will be most likely not approved if you've opened 5 or more cards with any bank within the last 24 months. Most business cards do not count toward that 5 total. So the ones that do count are these here, and it's very nice that they're very specific, but a lot of these cards do not count. So some people, their goal would be to basically focus on getting Chase cards first, Chase personal cards that they want first, and then up until they're at 424. And then, of course, they want to focus on business cards only from that point on, where they're getting as many cards as they possibly can that are business cards, and waiting for that 2 years to pass when they're back down to 324. Once you're at 524, you're no longer eligible. That's one approach. What my wife and I did was my wife stayed under 524 for a while, and I did not. I'm probably at like 1324 right now. So my wife is at, I believe, 724, and probably, I think, like by April, she'll be at 424 again, and we can look at other cards. But the moral of the story is you want to avoid, you don't want to just avoid all cards entirely, in my opinion, just for Chase. There are, like I said, a couple of issuers where that's also true, and they have some issuers that are a little bit more lenient than 524. But the biggest one that I've seen is Capital One is extremely sensitive to any inquiries. And so the first card that we had my wife get was, after we learned all of this stuff, was the Venture X card, which is a great card, and I would recommend it for most people. No matter what kind of a travel setup you really want, you really can't go wrong with going with the Venture X first. It is a net positive card. We can talk about that another time, but it tends to be a suggestion that I have for most people is to get started with that card, just because of how sensitive they are to inquiries. And it's a valuable card when it comes to, for us, our use case. We predominantly use it for when we're booking car rentals, and I can get into all those details another time. But that's the main point that I wanted to discuss when it came to application rules, is that there are rules, and that changes the strategy as to which cards you should apply for and when. All of your goals that we're talking about are a factor in all of that. And so you want to kind of keep that in mind and not overstep and make the wrong steps into the cards you shouldn't be going for. Now, the next thing that I wanted to just briefly touch on is advanced strategies, as a couple of YouTubers will put it. And they don't belong on public forums like YouTube. The reason why is because, of course, if you're talking about things that work really well and that are really advantageous use cases, if you start to talk about them in a public forum, they won't work anymore. And so they really don't belong in a place like this. I have no problem sharing it with you on a one-on-one basis. And, that's why I wanted to discuss, what is Custom Points Live for? And so I don't know if you guys remember back in the day, they used to have, radio shows where you could call in and ask your questions live on the air. And, the host would talk to you about what was going on. That's kind of how I'd like to approach Custom Points Live. I want you guys to feel comfortable commenting and I want you to feel comfortable, asking questions either live on the air. But I also have created, the ability for you to use my email address that I've created, which is custompointslive@gmail.com. If you send me an email directly, I can definitely help you with whatever it is that you're concerned about or wondering. I'd be more than happy to do that. That is my goal for this channel, is to not only have a community created of people that are looking to learn more and more about points of miles, but for you to be able to have a resource that you can ask a direct question that is offline, and I'd be more than happy to help you with that. So just know that the live streams are going to be predominantly of avoiding advanced strategies. We can talk about anything under the sun that belongs in a public forum, but if you comment something that's not going to be appropriate, I'll just simply send you a response that's custompointslive@gmail.com, because I just want you to feel comfortable using that email, and we can continue the conversation there. At some point, we're also going to create memberships on the channel here, and the memberships are going to allow us to actually pause the public video once it's at the end of the video here, and we can actually kind of break off into a members only sub video, and that video is going to be specifically for members behind a paywall. So there's an extra layer of information that we can talk about there that is a little bit more appropriate because it's no longer public. So just keep in mind, if you're interested in the channel and you want to have these kind of public conversations, absolutely we can. But I'd love if you would send me an email at custompointslive@gmail.com for anything related to advanced features, or advanced strategies, I should say. And then if you got any value from this video, please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. And if you think a friend might enjoy this video, please share the video with them. I'd like to create this 101 kind of not a course, but kind of a conversation to let people into the points and miles world that aren't really sure where to begin or how to get started. And the points that I mentioned so far today are all the things that you really want to be keeping in mind as you're approaching all of this, because they matter. You might make some missteps by applying for cards you really wish you hadn't. And then if you're worried about 524 and you really want to get this special card that is very advantageous for you, but especially when it comes to advanced strategies, but you're not able to because you've gotten more cards than you should have that didn't really matter, those are things to avoid. So if you have any ideas of what kind of cards you're planning on going for next and what cards you currently have, feel free to send me an email with what your current situation is, what your current goals are, and I'll be happy to give you some suggestions about how you might want to do it a little bit differently. And then the last one here is, if you have any questions, or second to last one, or ideas for other content, please don't hesitate to let me know in the comments below. I'd love for you to drop a comment. Let me know the kinds of things that you'd love to see videos on. I know we've been talking a lot about Built the last few days because that's what's been in the news, and we'll continue to have conversations on things that are new and noteworthy. I also plan on having interviews with a lot of important people that are in the space that might have other insights that they can bring to the table. And I'll also even interview, insiders, people that work for hotels that might have other insights on how do they view the people that use points at their hotel, and the value that the points bring to the hotel. So these are all insightful things and little tips and tricks that we can discuss along the way. So I'd love for you to be part of this journey. The interaction is really what the goal of this channel is. So obviously we're a small channel now. We have to grow into the point where we're going to have more interaction. But for now, obviously feel free to comment at the bottom of the video if you're watching this not live. But in the meantime, like I said here, if the last question would be is, if we did have a schedule for our live stream, what times of day would work best for you? So if it's 7 p.m. Eastern time, is it 8 p.m. Eastern time? I've been trying to do different times to see what works best for people. It seems like weekends seem to be pretty good and evenings seem to be pretty good. But like I said, I have a family, so for now I'm just kind of dropping in and making these videos when I have a moment. But the goal is to be able to go live regularly and have somewhat of a schedule while also having the random opportunities pop up. So feel free to make sure you hit that bell icon so that you know when we do go live, and you can join in the live if you have a moment, or you can always watch the video later on after the live is over. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining with us. And if you have any questions or you have any desires for future content, feel free to comment it below. Thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening, and God bless every single one of you.